Hey everybody, Jane here, and today I'm doing a review of the book I'll Never Tell by Mckenzie. This is a thriller mystery about 5 siblings, and they go back to the summer camp that their parents owned after their parents have died to hear the reading of the will. And before the will is read, there is a discussion or some concern about whether they are going to sell the campground or keep it. Some of the children want to keep it. The brother in particular really wants to sell it. He is in some financial trouble and doesn't have a lot of attachment to the camp. The will is read, and the father of the children in the will said, I believe that there was a murder years ago at camp. I believe one of you, my children, killed this camper, and I believe it was our son. His name is Ryan. I believe it was Ryan. So you have 48 hours to decide if you think Ryan killed this girl, and if you think he did, he shouldn't inherit. If you don't think he did, he should inherit with you guys jointly. And the verdict has to be unanimous. So obviously a lot of the siblings really want to keep the camp, and so they don't want Ryan to vote to get rid of the camp. So it would be better for them if they just considered him guilty. But they kind of go on an exploration to try to find out what happened and if their brother really did indeed murder this girl named Amanda, who was killed at camp when these guys were children, teenagers children. There's 5 siblings. There's Ryan, Katie, Liddy, Margot, and Mary. And Ryan is the oldest and the only boy. Margot was best friends with the girl that was killed named Amanda. Katie and Liddy are twins, and Mary is the Irish twin of Margot. So it goes Ryan, Margot, Mary, Liddy, and Katie. And so everybody sets out to kind of determine if they believe that Ryan did indeed kill Amanda, and if he didn't, who did. Overall, I had a really good time with this book, and for me it was a 4 out of 5. I did buddy read it with my best friend Christina, and she also enjoyed it. So her and I sometimes have very different taste in books, so if we both enjoyed it, it's probably a pretty solid read. A few things that I absolutely loved about it. Number 1, formatting. And I don't think this is a spoiler because I'm going to show you really early on, but they have a board that keeps track of everybody's movements. And we learn a little later that this is all going to be laid out on a whiteboard, but they lay it out for us early in the book. So I'm going to show you kind of one of these. And again, this is pretty early on. We're in the 60 pages, so I don't feel there's too many spoilers here. But this shows you each of the characters that has been mentioned so far and their locations at the different times of the night that the murder happened, up until the body was found. We also do get Amanda's perspective to find out exactly what did happen that night. So Amanda's kind of telling the story, I don't want to say as a ghost because that's not entirely accurate, but Amanda's telling us her version of what happened. And I really enjoyed getting her perspective on that as we are finding out stuff from the other siblings. Unlike some books that do this, there's not a lot of overlap. Sometimes books that have multiple perspectives like this, and particularly are like in the present and in the past, you get a lot of just retelling of the same information. I didn't feel like that happened too much in this book. I thought it was a compelling read. It was very much a page turner. I think I read it in 2 days. My friend took a little bit longer. I think she took 4, but she's a little bit slower of a reader than I am. But she also found it very compelling. There are awesome references to other literature, and particularly Agatha Christie mysteries. And since I'm currently reading some Agatha Christie mysteries, I had a real kick out of all the Agatha Christie mentions that were in this book. I just loved it. There was one point that I think Margot was like, I really wish we had Poirot here to investigate this murder, or if not him, at least Hastings. And I think if you've never read Agatha Christie, that probably isn't funny, but I found it pretty hilarious because I am currently reading, trying to read through the Poirot mysteries. And Hastings is always wrong. He's always close, but he's always wrong. I also loved the twins and the twin relationship, the twin sisters, Katie and Liddy. So they're very different and they're very unique. So Liddy dresses very boyish to the point that her siblings think she's a lesbian or maybe transgendered, but she doesn't identify that way. On the other hand, Katie, her sister, her twin, is very much the pinks and the girly and is actually a lesbian. They're very different, and while they get along, it's not the typical twin relationship that you see shown. So I did really enjoy the twin relationship in this book. I have twins, so I always like books that feature twins. I did guess pretty early on who the murderer was. Although throughout the book I was kind of second guessing, like pretty much shortly after we met this person and they started talking, I was like, oh, that's the murderer. But then different stuff happened, and like me and my friend Christine were writing back and forth, and I'm like, oh, this just happened. Maybe they're not the murderer. I'm gonna kind of be disappointed if they're not the murderer and that person's the murderer. But I'm kind of thinking it might be that person now. So I did have a really good time with it, but I did guess who the murderer was pretty early on, but I was very satisfied with the way it turned out. So even though I guessed the murderer, even though I kind of had an inkling of why, I was completely happy with how the murder turned out and how everything went. There were a couple non-plot related things that I didn't love, which I only give a 5 to books that are like absolutely amazing new favorites. This wasn't quite one of them, and these things were mild complaints, but they probably led to this being not quite a 5 out of 5 for me. Although, you know, I really enjoyed it, but it still wasn't necessarily a new favorite. But these are minor complaints I had. The first thing is the kids' relationship to their parents is really complicated. And it's never fully explained or explored why. And I think I would have liked a little more explanation on why the kids' parents were the way they are. The kids' parents are the mom's very distant, the dad's very weird. And it's like, why did you have 5 kids if you act like you don't really want kids? And some of that is kind of explored, but it's never fully, it's just kind of there. And for as big of a part as it plays in the story, I would have liked a little more information on the parents and why they didn't have as loving a relationship with the kids as maybe they could have. But on the other hand, me and Christina also talked between ourselves and said, you know, these kids didn't have as bad a childhood as they act like they had either. These kids, and there is another person that, the camp caretaker, who, his mother was a drug addict, she died of an overdose, and he gets a little resentful sometimes because he ended up being raised kind of by their parents as a worker, not like as a child, but hired in to work there. And he was given to a family to raise, but worked at the camp, and they, like, his parents kept an eye on him. And so he has a lot of insight in wishing that that was like his parents and he was getting the love and care. And he's like, these kids are complaining and their parents are doing all this stuff for them. Like, yeah, maybe it's not perfect, but you know, just because your mom doesn't cuddle you every minute of the day doesn't mean she's a bad mom. At least your mom's not on drugs and being a prostitute. So there is like I said, the kids have this very negative, all five of the children really feel like their parents let them down. Their parents didn't have the intense relationship with them they felt like they needed. They didn't get enough hugs and kisses and cuddles as children. And because that was so much there and so important, I would have liked more insight into why the mother was so withdrawn from her children. The dad's kind of weird and kind of creepy, and I don't know, maybe I would have liked more insight into that too. I'm not sure. But especially these kids just having this concept of having kind of a bad childhood. When reading the text, I didn't feel like they had a terrible childhood. And like I said, me and my friend kind of had a conversation about these kids really didn't have it that terrible. Not every parent plays with their kids constantly. Not every parent, sometimes parents love their kids and show it through providing. And these kids act like they're neglected and abused, and they really weren't as far as I can see. So I would have liked a little more explanation of the family dynamics, and particularly maybe why the parents were the way they were, because I felt like that never got fully explained. There also is some conversation about Ryan having kind of a violent past. And one part of that is explained, but some of the rest of it's not, particularly in his relationship with Liddy. And I might have missed it, but I just didn't feel like for the level of violence they're acting like he has, I didn't see that being justified. So I feel like, because I think that was one of the reasons the dad suspected him, is because of all the kids. Ryan has a little bit of some violence, but even the big thing that makes the dad suspect Ryan is not something that I feel would make you think that my child is a killer. Like, if that happens, you might think your child wasn't maybe the most responsible person in the world, but I don't think you'd go straight to, my son must be a killer. He must have been the one who murdered the camper. So, yeah, I thought there were some things that could have been better explained, but overall, I loved the plot, I loved the characters, and I was very happy with the way the book progressed. So if you like mysteries and like thrillers, you might very well enjoy this. I definitely plan to read some more books by this author. And as a matter of fact, if you've read other books by this author, where should I start? Which one of hers are amazing? Which one of hers are kind of meh? Because I really love her and I want to read a couple of her really good ones. I do ultimately probably want to read all of them, but I want to make sure I'm reading like the top few first, because then I'll be much more forgiving on the books that are kind of like meh. I hate when you read a really good book by an author and then like the next two you read are kind of meh, so you give up on the author and then like there's 5 others that you would have really loved. So What Should I Read Next by Catherine Mckenzie. If you've read the book, did you like it as much as I did? Also, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe for more content. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like. My social media is below, as is a list of my books. I have written several books, mostly romances. Some of them you can read on Kindle Unlimited for free if you would like to do so. Reading my books, either through Kindle Unlimited or purchasing a copy, really helps to support me in this channel. So thank you so much and have a good day. This is Jane. Bye.